Hi, everybody. We're going to start here in just a couple of minutes. So thank you for being on time. Take a couple of deep breaths and relax. Maybe check in on the chat box and let me know where you're from and what you're doing today. Looking forward to spending a few minutes with you this afternoon talking about how to lead through difficulty. Stand by. We'll be right with you. It is the top of the hour, as far as I can tell. So we are going to jump in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to How to Lead in Times of Crisis. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Staver. I'm the author of Leadership Isn't for Cowards and a person who has the privilege of working with folks like leaders every single day. So what we're going to do today is we're going to spend some time talking about what it takes to lead in times of crisis. How do we, as people of influence, really reach out and know that we're having an impact? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of expand what our definition is of leadership. I know on the phone today, there are CEOs, there are line supervisors, there are managers. There are some of you who do not have direct reports, but are people of influence in your communities and in your companies and in your families. And I want us to fully embrace this afternoon, or wherever you are, in whatever world you're in, this notion of what leadership means. So to start the day, to start the session, let's talk about what leadership actually is before we dive into how to lead in times of crisis or difficulty. First, leadership is the extent to which you influence another person to achieve results beyond which they think they're capable. So shortly, to say it in the easiest way, leadership is really the extent to which you're able to influence another person. So whether that's your kid or your spouse or your community or your club or your job or your working group or your team, what you get to do every single day is be a person who gets to influence others. Now, I'm going to speak about leadership today in a more to a traditional view of leadership. But what I really want you to think about, whether or not somebody reports to you or you have any real authority, is I want you to think about how you can be more profoundly influential when this exact session is over. And here's why it's important. It's important because what we know about leaders is the leaders who are the most successful are the leaders who find themselves in a space where they're able to do what they need to do in order to move their organization, people, so on and so forth, forward. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be just sharing with you the best thinking I have been able to come up with around what it takes to lead more effectively. So all of you on this call today must have, when you saw the initial announcement that we were going to talk about leadership, and thought, wow, I want to know how to influence other people better. I want to know how to navigate what we're actually dealing with every single day. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is take the next few minutes. We're going to finish in about 50 minutes or so. And then this is going to be available. It is being recorded. It's available to any of you who you'll all get it as a result of being on the webinar today. And then I want you to share it and post it and give it to people that you know in leadership, whether it's for profit or not for profit, whether it's your synagogue, mosque, or place of worship, whether it's your local tennis club, really doesn't matter. We've got to have people step into the gap right now relative to leadership. And I don't mean stepping into the gap relative to leadership in the traditional sense, but in terms of how we more aggressively step into that gap. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, you know, Mike, when we sent people home I had a certain expectation that some leaders would really step up and lead. But what I found is many of those have not. Many of those have not stepped up and led like we expect them to, and some that we really didn't expect to really have. And I think we're going to be able to distinguish today what that actually means and why some of that is occurring. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about what this idea actually means. First of all, let's take a look at this quote. It requires courage to stare reality in the face and encourage those you lead to do the same. There's a lot going on right now in the world. There's a lot of hysteria in some sectors. There's a lot of denial in other sectors. There's a lot of paralysis in some places. There's a lot of overreaction in other places. The full continuum of success, the full continuum of reaction, the full continuum of failure is being highlighted all across the country. If you didn't get a chance to see the Marriott CEO's video, you really missed a treat. I have seen some do really well in my life. I have seen some leaders just blow the doors off in terms of what is necessary in order to lead, but he did an amazing job. If you have the opportunity to listen to him or get that video, I really, really encourage you to do that. So what reality do you need to stare in the face right now? What reality do you need to help those you influence stare at right now? Now, let's talk about reality from a fact-based sense of reality. We have a virus. The virus is escalating. There are many, many circumstances out there that are extraordinarily sad and difficult. So at no time in the next 45 minutes or so am I going to be taking this in any way lightly. But I want you to be very careful that when you are influencing others, whether it's your direct reports, your kids, your colleagues, your spouse, your community, that you stare reality in the face in contextual framework. One of the things people you influence need is they need context. Let me give you an example. This morning, I received an email from an organization that did some math and said, if 1.5% of our organization dies, this is the number it's going to be. And it was a big number. It was a really big number. I think the person felt like they were leading well. I think they thought that they were speaking to their leadership team to say, let's prepare for this scenario. Here's the challenge with that. 1.5% of their population is not going to die. In the worst case, the CDC is saying that 1.5% of those infected will die, and those are relative to specific age groups. Is it going to be big? Yes. Is it going to be scary? Yes. Is it going to be tragic, immensely tragic for people we love, care about, and influence? Yes. But for that leader to make a statement that if 1.5% of the population dies, we're going to be in trouble is not factually based. And what it did was create an emergency phone call and all kinds of conversations. And then I was invited to be on the call. And when we really started looking through it, what we discovered was the fact of the matter is that probably there is a relative to people in the whole organization, which is tragic, don't get me wrong, but it isn't a need for hysteria and gross overreaction. So what I want us to do today is have the courage to stare reality in the face and encourage those you lead to do the same. Those of you who have worked with me before, those of you who have heard me before, know I tend to be pretty reality focused. I don't tend to put lipstick on a pig. And I told somebody yesterday, there's not enough lipstick in every Ulta cosmetic store in the world to buy enough lipstick to make this pig look pretty. There's just not. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to lean into the notion of what is real and what have we found at the Staver Group and what have I found in my work in the last couple of weeks that the best leaders are doing in a way that creates really outstanding results. We're going to talk about some good news. We're going to talk about some best practices. But the first thing I want us to all embrace is the notion that it's going to require you to be courageous to stare reality in the face and encourage those you lead to do the same. So before I go to the next slide, I have two challenges for you. First of all, I just want our mantra to be for our next 45 minutes or so together to be this. This is temporary. This is temporary. Continue to recite to ourselves over and over and over again, this is temporary. Secondly, for the next 45 minutes, unless you're listening to this on your phone or watching this on your phone, I'd like you to turn your phone off, not check any emails, not scroll through, not answer any notifications. Probably nothing's happening unless you're an infectious disease doctor that's happening right now that's going to require your immediate attention. You have to take care of yourself. And the way that you do that is by understanding what are the actual factors involved in what this looks like. So first thing, let's define a crisis. Because long after Corona, COVID-19 passes, all of you on this call are going to enter into some kind of crisis in your life. In fact, I believe that all of us are either coming out of a difficult period, going into a difficult period, or right in the middle of a difficult period. Most of us are right in the middle of one right now. But someday you may want to listen to this webinar again. Someday you may dig this out of the archives when you're having a personal crisis, or when you're having a business crisis, or when you're having a family crisis, or when you're dealing with something that feels like a crisis to you. But if we're going to stare reality in the face, and I think we are, and if we're going to be successful, and I think we will, then we have to be rigorous about truth. Here's the truth. A crisis is, and this isn't my definition, this is the Webster family definition, and they do a better job with definitions than me. The definition of a crisis, you can see it right here on your screen, is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. These are ors. A time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. You might argue, and I might agree, that right now we're in a period of all three. But what we really need to be aware of is how do we successfully navigate this time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger? And the first way we navigate it is to force our minds into the temporary mindset. And this is what I mean by that. Martin Seligman, Dr. Seligman, years ago, professor at the University of Pennsylvania, did some research and he evaluated what's the difference between an optimist and a pessimist. An optimist and a pessimist are not necessarily differentiated by how chipper or happy they are. They are differentiated by how they see difficulty and how they see success. Let me say that again. Optimists and pessimists are largely distinguished and differentiated by how they see difficulty and success. Optimists tend to see difficulty in a temporary, specific way. They don't tend to minimize. They don't tend to avoid. They don't tend to ignore danger. They tend to look at the danger in a specific and temporary way. Right now, I'm sitting in my office in my home. Right now, I am not in danger. Now, if I went down to the grocery store, didn't sanitize the hand cart, got around people who were sick, then the chances of my danger go up. But I see this time as specific to this particular issue. And here's why this is important. What your brain wants to do and what the brain of those you influence wants to do is generalize and do a lot of what ifs. Well, what if this happened? And what if this happened? And what if this happened? And what if it got bigger? And what if more people die? And then when that starts to happen, it sets off an alarm in our brain. So the first thing I want us to do today is give ourselves the gift of the temporary framing of this problem. One of the challenges that we're facing right now is that we are going to have to deal with multiple issues as leaders that have nothing to do with the virus, except for that the virus triggered it. So let's take a look at the 4 human needs. Now, for those of you who I've worked with before, those of you who've been through my Maestro certification program and other things, this is going to sound very familiar, but this is going to take on a whole new meaning for us as leaders going into the future. The first human need is this: certainty. One of the reasons that there is an epidemic of fear in our culture right now is that there's a lot of uncertainty. Is Dr. Fauci telling the truth? Is the president telling the truth? Is the head of the World Health Organization? I mean, we don't know. Is it going to be 200,000 deaths? Is it going to be 100? What? I mean, and if you look at the statistics, they're very wide. So one of the things that you as a leader must do is you must create what we call pockets of certainty. Think about that for a minute. In order to lead effectively in a difficult time, the outstanding leader must create pockets of certainty. And that pocket of certainty may be something as simple as, I will get you information as soon as I have it. Our firm right now is working with our bank to look at what the SBA options are, because as you can imagine, the speaking industry has basically evaporated overnight. Thank God. The coaching business and the consulting business has not. But we're working with our bank, and our bank has done a phenomenal job of providing certainty. We called on Monday. They put us on the list. They told us what the process was going to be. They called my team back today. They explained the next steps. They told us when they were going to be in touch with us next. We don't know if we're going to get any relief or not. We don't know if we're going to get any payroll relief or not. But that person at that bank demonstrated leadership, even though they have no authority over us whatsoever, by providing certainty for us one step at a time. Where could you, in the lives of the people that you influence, start providing certainty today? Is it as simple as having a gathering on a consistent day at a consistent time? I have a friend and a client in Canada, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, same time, same place, has a meeting virtually like all of us are having today. Maybe it is you will provide certainty as to next steps for them. Many of you have shifted from tactical leaders, people who are providing information on how people do their jobs better, to how people need to live better. So I want you to start writing down some ideas of how you could provide certainty. Could it be a consistent meeting? Could you be calling your direct reports, those you influence or care about, on a regular basis so they start to predict, oh, I'm going to hear from Jane, I'm going to hear from John, I know I will, they're going to be in touch. One of the things that calms the mind is when the mind knows that there is certainty. People will follow you if you're a person of influence over the next quarter hill, even if you're not exactly sure where you're going, if you do it with certainty. Come with me. I just got off the phone 2 minutes before we started broadcasting with somebody. Amazing, amazing leader. Guys, one of my very close friends. And he said, Mike, here are my thoughts. And he gave me 3 things. And he said, can you join me in this quest? This is where I want to go with this particular issue. And I said, I'm with you. I don't know where we're going to go, but I know this. I felt better about the issue he and I were talking about because he showed up on the call with certainty. He showed up with a plan, and that's very important. Number 2, people need to feel significant. If you're going to be a person of influence, they need to feel significant. And I'm going to talk in a minute about some really amazing ways I'm seeing people provide significance to the people they influence. But it could be as simple as doubling and tripling the personal notes you write. It could be as simple as I had a client do the other day, sent a meal to an elderly couple's home that was actually the parent of one of their direct reports because they were very nervous, and they sent a meal through whoever's delivering meals in their marketplace right now. And you would have thought that this couple had just won the lottery. Why? Because they felt more significant. What else did they feel? They felt more certain. They felt more certain that somebody out there is paying attention. And if somebody out there is paying attention, I'm going to feel better. I remember the other day, somebody called me on the phone and they asked me this question. They said, Mike, how are you doing? I mean, you're all over social media. You're doing webinars. You're talking to thousands of people a week. How are you doing? I don't care about me right now. How are you doing? I was like, wow. I was so stunned by what an overwhelmingly positive feeling it was to have somebody ask me that question. There are people in your world right now that just need you to pay attention. So how are you demonstrating significance? If you're going to, and part of the way you demonstrate significance is to provide some certainty. Is there somebody in your life or in your work, somebody in your organization, somebody that you could reach out to just to check on, to make them see how they're doing? I'm going to talk in a minute about what I think the secondary issue is that you're going to have to deal with as a leader or person of influence. I'm going to give you a hint. The secondary issue we're going to have to deal with are the mental health issues that we're going to have to start dealing with, our own and others. One of the ways that we can soften the blow of the mental health issues we're going to be dealing with, the anxiety or the fear, the sadness, the depression, that kind of thing, is to start doubling and tripling down on significance. Personal notes, telephone calls, plans. I was on the phone with a group today in the Northeast, and they're having their first virtual cocktail party tonight. That is a great way to bond, is to have gatherings that help people feel more significant. The third human need is esteem. That is, do I feel better because I'm associated with you? I used to say that esteem had to do with I feel better because I'm associated with a brand, right? I'm associated with Pepsi. I'm associated with Marriott. I'm associated with Baird and Warner. I'm associated, whatever the brand is that I'm associated with, I feel better having been affiliated with this organization. I still think that's important. The other day, I heard somebody sent me an email and said, I was going to leave the company I'm in. I'll never leave this company because of the way they're handling this crisis. Brilliant. So that's still real. And I want all of you to hear me say, I think it's still important. What's more important, though, is that the esteem is built on you. I feel better about working with you because of what you're doing during this time of difficulty. If you're my boss, my supervisor, my parent, my cousin, whoever you are as a person of influence in my life, I'm going to feel better about being with you because you help me deal with certainty and significance, that you help me stare reality in the face, that if I start getting a little sketchy and go off the range and start saying irrational things, that you can bring me back to center. Ooh, I feel so much better having talked to you is about the best compliment you as a person of influence can get today. Where could you provide a greater sense of esteem? In other words, how can you help people feel better about being associated with you and your brand? What are the resources necessary? Are there resources that have largely been kind of not really used very much in your organization that you could use? We dealt with a company last week that has an EAP, an employee assistance program. Nobody had really ever used it except for a few medical issues. And they rolled this EAP program out in a huge way to find resources. Maybe you have resources in your community that you could put a list together and help those you influence say, here's a list of places that X. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you could call here if you don't have an EAP. If you're looking for whatever, here's where you could do. This is what you could do. What could you do so that people start to look to you as a person of influence as a resource, not just of information, but to feel like, oh my gosh, that person at least is paying attention. The final thing is freedom and autonomy. Since your mother had her first contraction, you as a human being have been seeking freedom. The birthing process is the attempt of the baby to break free of the bonds of the mom into a more free life. Learning to crawl, freedom. Learning to walk, freedom. Learning to tie your shoe, freedom. Learning to eat by yourself, freedom. Being potty trained, freedom. Graduating, freedom. Getting your first job, freedom. Getting your driver's license, freedom. Your entire psyche for your entire life has been built on sequential degrees of freedom. Right now, one of the big challenges that's going on in the country is that every day we're hearing somebody say less freedom, less freedom, less freedom, so that in the long run, we can all be healthy. Depending on the state that you live in, depending on the place where you live, you're going to get varying degrees of suggestions for freedom. But the thing I want you to know about this, and this may surprise some of you when I say this, is we have to be careful with our words. When we're a person of influence, we have to be very careful with our words because words matter. When we say, or a leader says, words like lockdown, that triggers a very different subconscious response than shelter, than isolate, than quarantine. You see, lockdown, if you actually look up lockdown in the dictionary, it says what happens during a riot in a prison. Now, for those of you homeschooling little kids, you may feel like it's a riot at home every day. But what I want you to use is I want you to use words that articulately discuss what the freedom is. For instance, here in Arizona, our governor, Governor Ducey, yesterday issued basically a shelter-in-place order. When he did that, it all of a sudden triggered some things that were, shall we say, a pretty strong reaction. I went and read it. And what tends to happen is that he says that, I love what you said there, Rochelle. Cuomo called it a pause. Our governor called it the shelter in place or deeper isolation. I don't remember the exact words. But then he went down a list of everything you could still do. You can hike as long as you're not around a lot of people. You can go for a bike ride as long as you're not around a lot of people. You could, and he took some heat with some of the comedians for that. But one of the things I loved about what our governor did was he framed caution in the context of what you can do, not in the context of what you can't do. So when you hear people talking about what they can't do, acknowledge that, right? Let me give you one of my favorite quotes I heard the other day. It's actually a meme, and there's a lot of memes going around, a lot of funny memes going around. This is the particular meme I heard that I saw that I loved. Snoopy and Charlie Brown are sitting on the end of a pier. And the shot was not a picture, obviously, but the drawing was of Snoopy and Charlie Brown with their backs to you're looking at them from behind. And Snoopy's sitting next to Charlie Brown. And I think it's Charlie Brown that says, "Someday we're all going to die." And Snoopy says, "That is true. But on the other days, we will not." Is that awesome? Someday we're all going to die, but on all the other days, we will not. Do you see the context of freedom there? Because as soon as you, as a person of influence, contextualize things for people, they all of a sudden feel more free. And so I want you to start working through this notion of how you frame things for people. When people say, "I can't go outside," there is not a state in the United States where that is true. I can go out in my backyard right now and lay on a lounge chair and take a nap. So I want you to think about freedom in terms of the cans, not the can'ts. And I want you to share with people you influence and brainstorm the things they can do within the framework of their own personal safety. My mother, for instance, my mother's 80 years old. She's the only evidence I know God exists. She's an amazing human being. She said the other day, "I feel like you boys put me in prison." And I said, "Well, Mom, I'm not there, but I think my other brothers did it nicely." And she said, "But I can still go in my backyard. I can still sit on my patio and read. I could still walk to the mailbox. There are things I can still do. I just can't go to my church group, go visit people like I used to." Perfect frame for what freedom looks like. So let's pause here for a moment. And I want you to think through certainty, significance, esteem, and freedom. And ask yourself, in the world of the people that you currently influence, whether it's buyers or sellers, whether it's family or friends, whether it's people that report to you, whatever it is, where could you increase the intensity of certainty, significance, esteem, and freedom? I assure you, every single morning when I get up, these are the four things I'm thinking about, and it is difficult on some days to think it through. But if you keep these four things in front of you at all times and say, how can I provide certainty for this person? How can I demonstrate certainty? You can be sure I'm going to call you every single Monday at 8 o'clock. You don't need to say it. Just do it. They'll figure it out themselves. Let's look at the next thing to think about. Here's some things to avoid. So one of the things that is going on in an overstimulated environment where we have a virus that is on the march all across the country is that not only do I want you to be thinking about the things that you can do, which is four of the things I just talked about, I want to talk about some things and share some things with you as a person of influence that you need to avoid, that I want to encourage you to stay away from. Number one, I want you to stay away from ambiguity. Now, you might be like, "Oh yeah, that's going to be really easy." No, you're right. It isn't easy. Ambiguity means I just sort of have these vague notions and hunches and that kind of thing. And this might happen or that might happen, or I'm not sure what's going to. As a leader, you can't afford ambiguity if we're going to give certainty, right? So if you don't know, then be certain that you don't know. If you have a way to share what you do know, not what you heard from somebody that heard from somebody, share that. Let me give you some examples. I am unambiguous about the fact that this is temporary. I am not ambiguous about the fact that we will come out of this with some loss and with some very ill people that is very tragic. I am not ambiguous about that. I am not ambiguous that every one of you on this call could hang up this webinar in just a few minutes and have a massive impact on other people's feelings of safety, security, love, and concern. I'm not ambiguous about that. There are things in the back of my brain that I deal with every day that I have some ambiguity about, but I don't communicate that to my followers. I do not communicate that to people unless I think it is germane to certainty, significance, esteem, and freedom. So I want you to think through that. Try to avoid ambiguity. Number two, I want you to think through this idea of how do we stay away from speculative conversations. Most of you know I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to the news. The only even news-ish thing I've done in the last 3 years has been I watched a segment of 60 Minutes on Sunday night with Brene Brown, which was absolutely amazing. But I have heard rumors that they are estimating the death toll from this to be like 150,000 person delta. When we have speculative conversations, what it does is create a gap in the brain of the person who is listening to the speculation. As a leader, one of the things you want to do is avoid speculation. And what I mean by that is you don't want to go, here's what I think is going to happen. I was on a panel the other night and somebody said, well, when do you think the economy is going to recover? I'm not an economist. I have absolutely no idea. I will not speculate. But I did go back to it's going to be temporary. It is going to end. And the vast majority of people are going to come out of this and enjoy the recovery. The third thing that you should avoid, and it's critical if we want to be successful, is denial. Denial is not what you think it is. It's not denying that the virus is real. It's not denying that we're in a crisis. It's not denying that social distancing works, whatever. It's none of that because that would just be foolish at this point. Denial is denying the fact that you can have a big impact in people's lives. Denial is when you look around at the people you influence and don't pay attention to cues. Are there people that you influence right now that are connected to you, that you love, care about, and respect, that may be having something going on, that may be making I don't know if I'm going to make it through this sort of off-the-cuff comments? Denial would be not paying attention to those things. Denial would be hearing things and not taking the second step. It's not the first question that matters. It's the second question. So people that you influence, care about, love, and appreciate may say things. Their affect may change. Their participation or engagement may change. Most people, unless they're just screaming extroverts, are just not going to come out and talk about what's going on with them. Now, I don't want you to practice psychiatry or psychology or medicine or any of that without a license, but I don't want you to be in denial about the impact that this may be having on some of the people you influence and not be afraid to talk about it. Now, there are a lot of people on this webinar right now, and I appreciate every one of you being here. But let's have a conversation about you. We're recording it, but I'm not going to call any of you out. I don't want you to be in denial about you either. You can't take care of them until you take care of you. And if you are starting to experience any anxiety or little moments of darkness or concern, which all of us are, right? I just had lunch and had this very conversation that, sometimes I'm doing okay. And then I'll just have this moment of, wow, man, this is pretty big, right? So I want you not to be in denial about what's going on with you. I talked to somebody Monday and I said, how are you doing? And they said, I just get through things. I just power through. I'm like, right, I know. That's what you do. That's not what I asked you. What I asked you is, how are you doing? And then we were able to have a more intimate, more personal conversation about what's really, really going on. So don't, please avoid denial. Let's talk about number 4. Number 4, I think, is a critical piece of the puzzle, because if we do this effectively, if we avoid this effectively, we are going to accomplish all 4 human needs. And this may sound really obvious, but I want you to start looking at this notion of abandonment. And here's what I mean. I heard somebody the other day say, well, I don't want to over communicate. I don't want to be in people's faces. I don't want to bug people. If you're a person of influence, you have to. If you're a person of influence, you have to be deeply involved every single day in the process of how you're going to be more effective at being connected. I heard somebody the other day say this to me, and I almost had almost had a little moment of a stroke there. They said, you know what? I think our people are doing well. I think they're doing as best they can under the circumstances. I said, do you think that or do you know that? They said, no, I think that. I said, how often have you been in contact with your people? And they said, well, I try to check in with everybody once or twice a week. Listen, I want you to hear me say something very clearly. You cannot over communicate. I was on I have been on multiple sales meetings, multiple team meetings. I'm probably on 2 to 3 different kinds of meetings every day via Zoom. The attendance has never been greater. The attention has never been greater. The questions have never been tougher. The engagement has never been better in my experience. But that only happens in organizations where there's no abandonment. So I want you to know as a leader, people are watching you. People are paying attention to you. And so what I want you to do is think through how you can really work at not abandoning. And by abandoning, I mean being fully present. And this is not being fully present. Let me know if there's anything I can do. There is a tendency to sit back and wait to be asked. There is a tendency to want to sit back and wonder. Here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to do that. I want you to engage. I want you to have Zoom meetings. I want you to send out videos. I want you to do things that are necessary. And yes, Jennifer, I will address the optimism question in just a minute. I want you to spend time saying, how do I be more fully present for myself first and for others second? Let's take a look at the next slide, and let's talk about some things that you got to pay attention to. First thing, let's talk about self-care. Self-care is not getting a haircut or a manicure or that kind of thing. My buddy, Leo Ardeen, the CEO of United Teletech in New Jersey, really great mindfulness guy, wrote a blog that I thought was brilliant. And he talked about how self-care now has to transcend what we used to think it was. Get a massage, get your nails done, get your hair colored. Because let's just face it, everybody, most of our nails and hair is going to be its pretty normal length and color here pretty shortly. Self-care transcends that. And one of the things that's important is for you to pay attention to your own self-care. So Jennifer, you asked a great question about managing energy with other people. Let's talk about how we do it with ourselves. And then I'm going to talk about how to be more effective at taking care of yourself, and then how can you help other people take care of them. I'm going to give you a few examples. I want you to stay off the news. I want you to turn it off. I want you to remember this phrase: sipping on poison. Sipping on poison. It isn't the guzzling of the poison, because you'll know you're going to die then. It's the sipping of the poison. It's the incremental things that let things creep into your consciousness all day long. So how do we manage that? Here's what we do. We manage that by, when we hear the intrusive thought, or we hear the toxic thought, or we hear that belief come into our head, we let it pass. We entertain it as if it's just walking past us at a bus stop or on a sidewalk. Let me give you an example. We're working right now, as I mentioned earlier, with our bank and the SBA and that kind of thing, to look at things for ourselves and our clients. And today we got a little bit of news that kind of made me wonder. So I had one of those little non-self-care thoughts drift into my head. I entertained the thought, and then I escorted the thought out by moving on to something else. Here's what I want you to go subscribe to if you haven't. goodnews.org. goodnews.org. I think it's goodnews.org, O-R-G. They will flood your inbox all day long with good news. That's what you do. So Jennifer, when you're dealing with somebody else who's having a struggle being optimistic or a struggle with their energy, get them goodnews.org, tell them to download the Calm app, and they need to be in that space all the time. But here's what we don't do with self-care. We don't shame ourselves. We don't criticize ourselves. We don't be hard on ourselves. If you feel like garbage for an hour, feel like garbage for an hour. I share something with people called worry scheduling. Worry scheduling is actually putting something on, if you're a worrier, putting something on your calendar so that you have time to worry. I have a very good friend who put worry scheduling on their calendar for last Friday. And they said to me, I scheduled Worry Mike. I thought it was so ridiculous. Goodnewsnetwork.org. Thank you, Brandon. goodnewsnetwork.org. Really good. So what they did was they scheduled worry for 10 a.m. They said, I'm a big worrier. And I said, well, schedule it. And they said, okay. So they put it on their calendar for 10. Here's how it works. You put it on your calendar. When 10 o'clock comes, you sit down and go, okay, now's my time to worry. And they said they scheduled 30 minutes, but after 6 minutes of worrying, they thought, oh my God, this is the biggest waste of time I've ever had in my whole entire life. I got to get up and get on with my day. You know why? Because the brain would rather it trickle on you. So what I want you to think about is, how do you provide for those around you ways to manage their energy and their optimism? And the ways we do it is never shame or judge, never try to talk them out of it or cheerlead them out of it. Give them resources like goodnewsnetwork.org, like the Calm app, CALM. I tell everybody I know, if you're not listening to that for 5 minutes a day, your brain is starving. So I want you to think through that. Let me answer your question really quick about this drive to speculate. I get asked every day. I've been asked by the media. I've been asked by clients. I've been asked by friends. I've been asked by a lot of people, Mike, what do you think? And so I never tell them no. I never tell them I have no idea. I only tell them what I know. And I said, let me tell you what I'm absolutely sure of. I'm absolutely sure it's temporary. I'm absolutely sure if you follow the CDC guidelines, wash your hands, stay away from sick people, sanitize, if you're sick, don't go around people. I'm absolutely sure if you do those things, you're going to reduce the chances of spreading it and reduce the chances of getting it. I'm also sure that if you spend your day focused on the highest and best productivity, controlling the things you can control, you'll come out of this better than you think. I'm also sure that it's temporary. And I'm also sure that 85% of the people who are afflicted currently recover and have mild symptoms. I'm also sure that there's some people who aren't going to do as well. But for today, on every other day, someday we're all going to die. On every other day, we're not going to. And for right now, you're not going to. What can you do to advance your own personal cause or do better? Let's look at the second thing that I want you to be thinking about or focused on. And that is, how do you more effectively maintain connection? What your followers need from you every single day is this notion of connect, and connect some more. Let me give you some best practices I'm seeing out there. Of course, the people who do a really good job of connecting, or who have been through a process where they teach this kind of thing, know that if you're writing 3 to 4 to 5 handwritten notes a day and dropping them in the mail every day, it's going to help you stay connected to people. But what it's also going to help you do is it's going to help you feel better. Here's what your brain does when you're scared or when you're threatened. Your brain does this. It closes up. It wants us to tighten up. And the answer is to pry our arms open. The answer is to pry ourselves open and say, how can I more meaningfully connect with the people that I influence every day? So could you call 4 or 5 people a day? Could you write 4 or 5 handwritten notes? I got a note from my state senator in Florida, who's been a friend of mine long before he was a state senator. I'm going to reach out and call him tomorrow, because there's mutual connections happening. And some of you, this is the opportunity to connect with your people like never before. So how do you reach deep and say, how can I, in interesting or curious ways, connect with people? Do you know that a person likes a particular thing that you could send them, a particular book, a phone call? Maybe you could invite somebody who you know lives alone to join you tonight for 10 minutes. Maybe you could have dinner together. I was talking to somebody the other day that their family is all in isolation in separate parts of the country, and they all got on a Zoom call at a designated time, so it wasn't too late for the people on the East or too early from the people in the West. And they turned on their Zoom cameras and they all made dinner, and they sat around a table having dinner together. That's connection. Do you know somebody that works for you that's really stressed out? Maybe you know a single parent who's got multiple children who's trying to educate them or take care of them. Could you do something for them? Could you send a meal? Could you make a call? Could you take an hour out of your day and teach their kids a lesson from something that you learned? Maybe read them a story if they're little kids. What can you do to more meaningfully connect to the people who you influence every single day? This is a thing that I've got to have on top of my mind all day. But I believe the connectors in this process will be the thrivers afterwards. Not to mention the fact that when you open instead of close in connection, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel better as well. Let's talk a little bit about how we can be a little more effective at doing the things necessary to be successful. Let's talk about service. Somebody the other day said, and those of you who are on my earlier webinar on how to be productive heard me say this: you never have to be nervous when you're being of service. You never have to be nervous when you're being of service. I think that when all of you are in your individual businesses and you're influencing other people and you're being effective, I think one of the things that you can do right out of the gate is figure out, how can I serve others better? How can I do something that would serve others? And if it's nothing else than just reaching out. Let me give you a couple of examples. I was talking to somebody the other day who was asking me a question about how to help employees and help clients and help others without feeling like it's self-serving. And I said, as long as you check your motives every morning, as long as you get up every morning and think, today is the day where my heart is full of service, my heart is full of opportunities to serve, is the day you know you're going to make the right choices. If there's an ulterior motive, if you're trying to build the business or scale your business or do something else, and you don't just come right out and say it, then that's an impure motive. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think through the idea of, how do I open myself in service to others? What are some ways you could serve? What are some needs in your community right now? Could you start something where you bring people together? I heard somebody the other day, they're in a business, they're a salesperson, and what they did was they sent meals. I think it was meals. It was something to the local nursing home that was within their guidelines so that they could pass things out to people there, little gifts, a little something to let them know they were thinking about. I saw somebody else put a group of people together they were all working remotely. And they said, we're going to adopt this nursing home or this retirement community, and we're going to just write notes of love, care, and thanks to those people. Somebody else recently said, we're going to send something to our local paramedics or our local hospital without, getting in the way or doing something that's not sanitary. So what I want you to think about is, how do you as a person of influence serve your followers? And the best way you can do that as a person of influence is to start thinking of others in terms of what they need. And how can I pour myself more effectively into others? Then a plan. You cannot be fearful of you cannot be as fearful if you have a plan. Let me explain what I mean by that. A plan is fear's biggest nightmare. A plan is fear's biggest nightmare. What I want you to think through is, I want you to acknowledge the discomfort that your followers feel, and then I want you in your head to set that aside and create a plan. And I'd like you to do it. If you can do it by the day is better, but if you can only do it by the week, do it. Here's what our agenda is going to be for Monday. Here's what I'm going to do for Monday. Here's what my plan is for Tuesday. Here's what my plan is for Wednesday. Here's what my plan is for Thursday. Here's what my plan is for Friday. And I want it to be on these 3 areas. What is my plan for self-care? What is my plan for connection? What is my plan for service? If you want people to follow you over the next quarter hill, they will charge hell with a squirt gun. If you have a plan where you're sharing a good plan of self-care with them, where you have a plan for connection and you have a plan for service. What if you took some of these ideas off of this webinar and did a webinar for your followers? What if you took my webinar on how to be calm and productive and created discussion groups around that? What if that was your plan? What if you were giving people unique and incredible ways to continue to grow or develop their business in difficult times? Let me give you an example. A lot of you on this call are in the real estate business, and some of you are managing real estate offices. Some of you are actually listing and managing, and some of you are just good, solid out there helping people buy and sell houses. One of the things we have to be as leaders is we can't be tone deaf. We can't have a sense that we are not aware of what's going on. This kind of put your head down and keep plowing forward Newt Rockney kind of sensibility just will not work in this environment. You know, I just don't worry about things. I just keep doing what I'm doing. That's not going to work. It might work for you, but there might be somebody in your group who's really terrified. And so I was talking to somebody the other day about how not to be tone deaf, and they were in the real estate business. And I said, one of the things that you can do that'll make you not tone deaf is that you can acknowledge and be wise relative to the contextual framework that you build every day. And all that means, in not very fancy language, is how do I more effectively figure out what I need to do to create a space to be better at being forthright with the things that are going to help my clients, help my customers. So for instance, a retailer recently laid off most of their folks in every store. And one of the things that retailer did, were the people who were still employed, was started cascading through the organization resources that would help them get unemployment, would help them figure out what needs to happen next, would help them know when it's time to see the doctor, go to the ER, when it's not. Started boiling down the CDC guidelines so that people understood. These are all things that people are doing that are helping, but also advancing the business. I'll just turn myself in, right? We probably have done, 10 or more, maybe 15 webinars in the last couple of weeks, probably for now close to about 10,000 people. And we're not charging for those webinars. But what I know is that if I'm of service, if I keep showing up every day, I think that's going to come back, not in some new age way, but in a way that helps others. If my motive's right and I'm helping other people, that can only help me, even if it never even manifests in a dollar. The same thing goes for you. I want you to help your people say, what do they have control over and what do they not have control over, and get them focused on that. Because at the end of it all, what we have to be able to do is get ourselves focused on the notion that helping others figure out what they can do instead of avoiding what they can't do is really important. So here are the things I want you to remember. The first thing I want you to remember is be rationally prepared. I want you to be rationally prepared. I was in the grocery store yesterday, and I went to the meat counter and I bought a couple of fillets. And when I bought the fillets, the meat department manager at the grocery store was standing there, and he said, "How are you doing, sir?" And I said, "I'm doing well, thank you." And he said, "I'm looking forward to getting back to normal." I said, "Tell me what normal looks like for you." And he said, "Well, normal looks like for me that we aren't just frantic in the grocery store business." And I said, "Yeah, I don't get it." I said, "I don't get it." And he looked at me, this butcher in a meat department at an Albertsons, looked at me and said something I thought was so smart. He said, "You know, when people don't know what else to do, they do whatever comes to mind first." Oh my God. When people don't know what else to do, they do whatever comes to mind first. Our opportunity here as leaders is to influence others to be rationally prepared. As I walked away from him, I turned back to him and I said, "So when does the supply chain catch up? In other words, when do we start being able to buy toilet paper again?" And he said, "Walk down the water aisle." And he said, "And then walk down the paper aisle." He said, "The water aisle today is full because our suppliers on the water have caught up." And he said, "In another week, the paper suppliers will catch up as well." And he asked me what I did, and I told him, and he said, "The message to get out to people is we're going to be okay. And remember, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." Well, now there's signs all over the grocery store, what you can take and what you can't. But rationally prepared means that you have contingencies and you have plans. Number two, be future focused. So if I'm rationally prepared for today, I need to be future focused for tomorrow. How are you laying the groundwork for your followers to be prepared for when we come out of this? Because y'all, I'm telling you, when we recover, the boomerang effect of positivity is going to be enormous. So you don't have to share this with your followers yet. It may be too much for them, but I would encourage you, for those you influence, to look at what are the first 5 things we're going to do in the recovery in our organization, with our team, with our family, with our kids, and then start laying the groundwork for that now. The time to have a plan is now. The time is not to have a plan then. If the house starts burning down, it's too late for a fire escape plan. Number 3, Avoid speculation. We've talked about that already today. If you're getting pressure to speculate, then just go down the things you're certain about. I'm certain it's temporary. I'm certain that the majority of people, if they get it, will have minor symptoms. I'm certain that now they're saying 98% of people will survive and thrive through this. I am certain that we will eventually get back to work, and I'm certain that it will look different when we get back to work. When you're pressed to speculate, go with what you know to be true. This may seem funny to you guys. This may strike you as odd. Just stay grounded in reality. Take care of you. Look at what is real, not what you think is real. If you've got people on Facebook who are positioning every single thing, and I mean, I'm in the middle of writing a book, How to Thrive in Times of Uncertainty, and we're going to finish it up in the next couple of weeks. And you cannot even imagine the stories that I'm getting from people about their levels of belief about what's really happening. What I want you to do is be the leader who has certainty about what is real. And there may only be 5 things. There only may be 6 things. One of the things I want you to get your folks thinking about is this. Just because we're working just because we're working separately doesn't mean we're working alone. Just because we're working separately doesn't mean we're working alone. There is zero need to break community down. And you've probably all seen it. You've probably seen the Midtown Atlanta 8 o'clock clapping brigade that happens every night. All the people go out on their balconies in Midtown Atlanta and clap for healthcare workers. It started out with just about 10 people doing it. You could hear them. If you go listen to it tonight, it sounds like a football stadium. It's like nothing I've ever heard in my entire life. It's absolutely unbelievable. If you listen to the studio singers from Nashville who sing It Is Well With My Soul, if you listen to the Chino High School Choir in Chino, California, who couldn't do their concert, so they got on Zoom and they sung a song on Zoom to their audience while others clapped and listened in. If you think of my friend Leo's mom, who's 93 years old, and she lost her husband a few months ago, and she's been very sad. And now she's making masks, a surgical mask out of bedroom sheets. She made 500 last week. That's reality. If you think about the people who are out there having a massive difference in their community from behind a high definition camera, that's reality. It's also reality that this is scary and dangerous and difficult. Don't try to talk ourselves out of that. And the way you don't is you be values and purpose focused. Don't waver from your values. Do not allow your fear or anxiety to chase you away from your values, and keep helping your followers circle back to what matters and what's important. And maybe it's service and connection. Maybe for you guys, all you want to do is just keep preaching service and connection, service and connection. Let's be true to our purpose and values, even when it's scary, even when you're exhausted. I want you to get passionate about the recovery. I want you to think enthusiastically and passionately about what the opportunities are for you and your direct reports, your team, your family, whoever that is. How could you more effectively ramp up for it? In our organization, we have a pretty significant plan about what's going to happen as we start feeling the wheels of commerce start to fire up again. We can't do a whole lot about it until it starts to happen, but you don't want to be not prepared. And then finally, be optimistic, not tone deaf. Here's how an optimist approaches this as a leader. The fact is that pessimists usually live longer, to tell you the truth. Pessimists generally live longer by about 6 months. That's the last data I saw. Maybe it's a little longer, which makes sense because they tend to be a little more paranoid about their health and the sky's always falling. But I'd rather be a pessimist. I'd rather be an optimist. And I'd rather be an optimist because optimists see the world like this. An optimist sees the world realistically, but sees the negative things as temporary and the positive things as a sign of good things to come. Let me say that again. The optimist sees the negative things as temporary and the positive things as a sign of good things to come. We're going to wake up every single day. My friend Sean Hanks and my agent says, the sun is undefeated. The sun will come up tomorrow. The optimist doesn't just believe the sun will come up tomorrow. The optimist says, yes, that is true for the negative things, but just for now. The pessimist says, oh God, I think this is the start of something really, really bad. And then finally, what we've already said today, stay connected. Make sure you stay connected, most importantly to yourself, but then secondarily to other people. I'd like to hear what you thought about today. I'd like to know how we can help. If we can in any way, you can send an email to info@mikestaver.com. But most important, what I'd like you to think about is how can you better apply what you're learning today? And let me give you some ideas. You can share this with other leaders that you know. If you weren't on my how to stay productive under pressure webinar, then we'll send you that. All you have to do is send a request to info@mikestaver.com, and we will send that link out to you as well. I want you to just take the next 10 minutes to do some self-care. Maybe you listen to your favorite song. Maybe you meditate. Maybe you do things that you wouldn't have done before. Maybe you call a friend that has a couple of kids and offer to read their kids a story or play video games remotely with them so you can give that parent a break. I don't know what it is, but do something now that will cause you to be prepared for what is going to be better in the future. I'm Mike Staver. I hope this has been helpful. You'll be hearing from my team very, very soon and with the copy of this, and feel free to share it and post it with anybody that you know. We're here for you. We want to do every single thing we can to help you. Please never hesitate to ask. The answer is always yes. Of course, we'll do anything that we can. Take care, everybody. Blessings and good health to you as you continue to navigate these times.